Shalom Aleichem, my friends, in the land of Israel and outside the land of Israel. We are now on Thursday, which is almost Erev Pesach. Tomorrow night begins the holiday, the most glorious holiday of the Jewish people, Pesach, Passover. And everyone is busy this week and even before, especially the women, extremely busy cleaning, searching for any particle of Chametz that could stay somewhere or anywhere. And what can I tell you? It's almost a miracle. All you have to do is to ponder upon what's going on. What is it that makes us and makes our women to behave so frenetically in honor of the holiday of Pesach? The only answer that I could find for myself is what our sages said in the Talmud: "Bizchut nashim tzadkaniyot nig'alu avotenu mimitzrayim." Because of the merit of our righteous women, the redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt came to be. Throughout the generations, in every year, it's the same sight, the same thing. Our mothers, grandmothers, wives, daughters, so busy preparing for Pesach. It's unbelievable. The cleaning going on like no one's business. It's unbelievable. There must be some force behind them. There must be something that's pushing them to bring them such energy. This energy comes from a very spiritual source that comes as a reward that God gives them, to give them the merit to be the patrons of the Jewish people regarding when it comes to the redemption of the Jewish people. That's the only thing I could say, because it's really marvelous what we see. By the time Pesach is here, the houses, our homes are sparkling with such cleanness that stems from spiritual sources. Unbelievable. Why do we call it Pesach? Pesach is derived, of course, in English it's Passover, which is more explicit, at least pass over. What's going on? Pesach in Hebrew means to pass over. Lifsoach. The verb is lifsoach. Lifsoach means to step, to jump. In other words, you miss one house and you go to the other house. That's the meaning of Passover, which relates to us and brings to our mind the great miracle that happened when Hashem finally decided to conclude the plagues that fell upon the Egyptians right before the sortie from Egypt. Was the plague that killed all the firstborn. And for that, an angel, of course moved by the Almighty himself, had to pass from house to house. The Jewish people were all in the land of Goshen in Egypt. They were with the non-Jews also. But how do you distinguish between one Jewish house and a non-Jewish house? For that you need at least a malach, an angel. And he himself has to be guided by God. That's why we say in the Haggadah that God says, Ani hu velo acher. I am the one, not anybody else. So when the angel or the hand of God came, it passes over the Jewish houses. Especially that the Jews knew very well how to prepare themselves for that. And the blood of the lamb that they slaughtered was sprinkled over every door that they had, and that's how they were saved from that force that came to destroy every house in Egypt in which there was a newborn, a firstborn. And that's why we call it Pesach, to remind us of the passing over of God from one Jewish house to a non-Jewish house. Of course, most people don't even think about this miracle, but it is a great miracle. And you have to believe it. Otherwise, why did it retain the name Pesach? Unbelievable. Of course, we are reminded also of the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice of Passover, the Paschal lamb, that every Jew had to slaughter the lamb, and so that he can eat it on Erev Pesach before the holiday of Pesach. And as we have discussed before, that was another miracle that the Egyptians, although they knew that their God is being slaughtered, since the lamb was their God, one of their gods, and they could not stop the Jewish people. They stood there, petrified, of course unhappy of what's going on. Their religion is being massacred, and yet they could not move, they could not do anything. That's why, by the way, we call it Shabbat HaGadol, because it happened on the Shabbat before they left Egypt. And that was the great Shabbat. Let me engage with another question. I did speak about it last week, but now we would like to present a new theory regarding Chametz. Everybody knows that every Jew, wherever he is, in the land of Israel, outside the land of Israel, even if he lives in Black Africa or in China, he has to definitely give honor to the holiday of Pesach for 7 days. Outside the land of Israel, it's 8 days not to eat anything that is bread, or any similarity with bread, or any mixture with bread, like even beer or whiskey, or anything that has to do with what makes bread from barley or from wheat, is forbidden. But you have to understand, it's not just forbidden. The Torah specifically says and reiterates the fact that any Jew who will eat Chametz during those days of Pesach is liable to the most horrible punishment, karet, to be cut off. His neshama will be completely rejected from the home, from the world of God. Which means it's amazing. Of course, there's always a possibility of teshuvah. One can become again religious and be careful not to miss any mitzvah. But at the same time, at that time, if a guy does not believe and he continues, there's no hope for him in spiritual world. What is so terrible about Chametz? Chametz is bread. And bread is our friend. And not only that, our sages call bread, it is the parable of Torah. Like it says in the Pasuk, Lechu lahamu belahmi. God says, go and make war with my bread. What is the bread of God? That's the Torah, which means the Jewish people is under the obligation to learn Torah. Fine. But now let's go back again to the question. Then why suddenly he becomes our enemy? That which has been our food every day, that's life. And yet, instead, we have to eat matzot. Of course, we know the Torah tells us that the reason we eat matzah, that which is done that with carefulness, that there should be, that the dough should not rise above, after 18 minutes, it's forbidden already, finished, it's chametz. But it takes approximately 18 minutes for the dough to rise, and it becomes only matzah, which means you prevent it from rising, and you get the thin kind of galette that we eat, and that's called matzah. And that reminds us of the sortie of Egypt, because the Jewish people didn't have the time to prepare bread or to wait for bread, right? So they had to leave immediately. Quick, 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 go. And therefore they didn't have the time to wait, and therefore in order to take with them some kind of food, such as the matzah, the only thing that they could take with them is matzah, right? So in order to reminisce, to remember those days, that's why we eat matzah. Very nice. But then again, why is it the prohibition of Chametz so strict? It's like the end of everything. What happened? You see, in Kabbalah, there is a thought regarding it. I mean, the similarity of Chametz is the fact that it's rising, the dough rising. So it symbolizes the heart when it rises, which means haughtiness, to be Ba'al Ga'ava, a man of conceit. This is something that is extremely hated by the Almighty. So, since the Chametz reminds us of that, so the Kabbalah says that the Ari HaKadosh, the Holy Ari, tells us that you have to be careful because it makes you with haughtiness, with Ga'ava. This is a very difficult thing to conceive because we don't understand the connection between conceit and eating bread. I mean, even poor people, all they have to eat is bread, right? So what's going on? So let's say that what the Kabbalah says is definitely right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it has in it some thoughts that are difficult for us human beings to understand. There is another theory that the Chametz represents the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. So by the fact that we are not allowed to eat Chametz and we burn it on Erev Pesach, like tonight will be, for example, that which we call Bedikat Chametz, the search for Chametz. We're going to shut off all the lights and we go with the light of the candle to every corner, and then we find those little crumbs of bread that we have prepared, 10 of them, according to the teaching of the Holy Ari, right? And we go and we find them, we collect them one by one, until we have 10 of them, we put them in a special basket, and we wait for the morning, the next morning, to burn them, which is tomorrow morning this year. So, okay, so by the way, we have to prepare those crumbs of bread because there is no chance by tonight to find any bread except for some bread for tomorrow morning, that's all. Until the time when the burning of Chametz begins, which is approximately 10 o'clock, 10:15. That's the time when we have to burn the Chametz, we finish with it. After that, it's over. Forget about the bread, don't even think about it. Not only that, one of the things, besides the fact that we sold the Chametz to the non-Jew, we went to the rabbinical authorities and we sold our Chametz, any kind of Chametz, but still, because we are careful about to have everything as it should be, so we do an additional obligation that's called bitul, the annulment of Chametz. You know, when we burn the Chametz, you have to say 3 times, Kal Chamira de'ika birshuti, any Chametz or any bread that remains in my place. The chazite la chazite, I mean, whether I saw it or I didn't see it. Well, lihve betil ki'afra de'ara. I am completely eliminating it, annulling it, and considering it like the earth of the like the earth. 3 times, and you have to understand it, to understand the words, because they are brought to us in Aramaic. So you have to use the English or any kind of language, or if you understand Aramaic. Why? Because you have to understand that you are practically eliminating any trace of Chametz from your heart, which means it's not yours. Even if, God forbid, you forgot some place in which there is a crumb or something, by eliminating it from your heart and saying that it's not yours, which means you make it what we call hefker, at the disposal of anyone who comes in. which means if the non-Jew would know, he would be able to come, allowed to come and take and help himself with whatever chametz we might have, or anything that you sold to him. For 8 days, of course. The sale is final only after 8 days. So automatically after 8 days we tell him, well, sorry, it's not working, so everything comes back to you. Right? But in the meantime, for 8 days outside the land of Israel, or 7 days inside the land of Israel, we are not allowed to have any trace of chametz. You tell me, because it represents the evil inclination, I understand that there is a need to destroy the evil inclination. How do we destroy it? I mean, God created the evil inclination. He gave it to us with the good inclination, right? We have good nature, but we have also the problem with our inclinations, right? Temptations and things like that. So what do? We have to overcome. We have to resist the temptations and overcome. And that's what we do every day, right? It's a war between us and the evil inclination. Yet, the evil inclination is what gives us the purpose for living in this world. Otherwise, what would we be considered if we didn't have any freedom of choice? Which means if we didn't have the evil inclination, we would be considered like little animals, nothing else. But God wanted men and women to be here in this world in a way that even though they are confronted by the evil inclination, they will have to resist it. I know there are some terrible things going on, even today, even in Israel, unfortunately. There is that we call it abominations, such abominations as homosexuality. I'm not trying, God forbid, to hurt anybody's feeling, but homosexuality is definitely an abomination, as the Torah specifically says very clearly. It is an abomination. So you might say, oh yeah? Why do you say it's an abomination? But they were born like this. What can you do? The homosexuals, they were born like that. Well, there is a possibility that they were born like this. But let me, between you and me, aren't we all born with temptations? Let's say you are faced with a big temptation. Let's assume that here is a beautiful woman coming towards you. But she is married, let's say. But even if she is not married. But she is easy. You can have her. What do? If you are a person who keeps the Torah and you obey the mitzvot, then you are going to have to resist the temptation. This is exactly our function in life. Even the Shulchan Aruch, as I have mentioned many times, the Jewish code of law begins by the word hitgaber, which means resist, overcome. That's exactly our job in life. There are so many temptations in life. Let's say you keep kashrut, you don't eat non-kosher food. But let's say you are in Spain. It happened to me. I was in Spain. I was very hungry. At night, I was looking at the beautiful avenues, but I was stricken with hunger. Where am I going to eat? Plenty of restaurants. Plenty. But I cannot. It's not kosher. And I cannot find any kosher place. What do? Suddenly I saw the display of the most beautiful cheeses, kinds of cheese, all displayed in a vitrina. Unbelievable. At that time when I was hungry, I almost ate the glass. But then I resisted. I had to say to myself, wait a minute, Abraham, be careful, the Torah forbids. So what can I do? It was very easy for me to go in and enjoy myself, right? And not only that, it didn't cost so much. It was very cheap. At the same time, nobody saw me. And nobody was there to tell me, hey, Rabbi, you go to a non-kosher place? I could have gone freely, no one's business, that's it. but I knew that God is watching me. So I had to resist the temptation. And I didn't. I went to eat, to buy some fruits, and that's how I spent the night. That's it. Baruch Hashem, the next day I was already invited by kosher places, and where there was kosher food and everything. But the first night when I arrived, I had this terrible problem. Well, that's the problem of every Jew. If the Torah tells us, this is what you have to eat, this is what you cannot eat. We are not looking for reasons. We are the people, the nation who stood at the mountain of Sinai and said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We accept the Torah whether we understand it or not. One of them is the Chametz. Do we understand why? Okay, you could tell me it's because it represents the evil inclination and everybody understands that the evil inclination must be destroyed, which means you have to overcome it. Yes, true. But what does it have to do with Chametz? Go to Kabbalah, it tells you it's because of Gava, because it rises. Well, maybe there is a similarity, but there are many other things that rise. Come on. What is the connection between haughtiness and eating bread? I tell you the truth. The truth is that there is no answer. The answer lays within God Himself. I have to tell you a story. Would you like to hear a story? And you have to believe that this is what happens. Let's say you don't keep the law of the Torah. You go and take bread during the days of Pesach. Which, by the way, every Jew, even the non-religious, not so much religious, agrees with that. He will not, maybe 80% of the Jewish people do not touch anything that is similar to bread. Of course, there are those who do, unfortunately. What happens to someone who does eat chametz, despite what is the fact that it is forbidden, even though we don't know why? I'm talking according to our understanding, which is extremely poor. How much can we understand? The Torah was given to us with 613 precepts, and yet not one of them gave us the Torah does not tell us the reason behind everything. You could use your mind, perhaps, to explain to yourself, but you should keep in mind that the reason stays there in the place of God, in the world of God. That's the Torah of the angels, that's the Torah of God. Kabbalists come close to it. But still, we don't know the reasons behind many things, and especially chametz. Well, let me tell you something. A story, right? I promised a story. Did you ever hear about Chatam Sofer? The Chatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer, he lived about 275 years. He was the chief rabbi of Hungary in Pittsburgh. Yes. A very great Torah scholar and a very righteous man. We all study his books, and his reputation does not even demand any more explanations. By the way, he was the disciple of Rabbi Natan Adler, who is known as the eagle, the great eagle. But that's another story, okay? The Chatam Sofer had a Talmid, he had a student, and very close to him. He served him, he helped him, he was near him most of the time. But one day, that same Talmid, the student, came to him. He was already quite aged. And he said to him, Rabbi, I don't know what's happening to me. I have a big problem with my mind. What's the problem? He says, I have all kinds of speculations. I have doubts. I have all kinds of thoughts regarding our faith. And I have what we call safek. I I have a doubt about everything regarding the Torah, regarding God. Sometimes, of course, I have to do everything, I do everything. I observe all the laws. But from times I am stricken with questions in my mind, and this bothers me, I don't know what to do. The rabbi was distressed. Why would the best of his disciples have this kind of feelings? Usually this kind of feelings does not belong to someone who is totally immersed in Torah study and in the doing of the mitzvot. Usually it pertains to people who are not Shomrei Torah. They don't keep the Torah, so of course they have doubts. So the rabbi said to him, tell me more about your background. So the student started to tell the rabbi the story of his life. And then he told him that what happened was about last year, in his time, there was a lady. She came to the rabbi, the Khatam Sofer, with a cake, with a tort in her hands. And she came to him, it was Pesach, and she said to him, is this Chametz? Am I forbidden to eat it? Probably she was deranged or who knows what. The rabbi immediately, he was astonished that a woman would come with this kind of thing during Pesach. He said to her, get out, go quickly, destroy it. You have to destroy it. The woman went out with the tort, having all kinds of doubts. Why? It's baked nicely and everything. Why should I destroy it? She saw me, the student is telling the rabbi, and she came to me and she said, the rabbi said that this is forbidden. Is it really forbidden? Isn't this a pity to destroy such a beautiful tort? The student, at that time he was already, he himself a Torah scholar, right? So he said to her, no, it has to be destroyed, it's Chametz, give it to me, I will destroy it for you. So he's telling the rabbi, when I took it, I started to have all kinds of, I used my knowledge to see maybe I can find a way how to make this tort permissible. Maybe I can find a way how to declare it non-Chametz. And this is what I did. And finally, I found within myself some kinds of facilities regarding it, and I became lenient about it, and I declared it to be kosher for Pesach. And I even ate a piece. I think the story goes on like this. That's all. That's all. Today, by the way, you go to the stores and you find kosher le Pesach cakes for which you don't say mezonot, you say the blessing of Sheakol. And they are very tasty, by the way. But today is today. Today we have to say thank you to Hashem for everything. Anybody who was born for this generation is lucky. That's because you have all the pleasures right in front of you. And can you say the same about 100 years ago or 200 years ago? Please. They didn't even have 90% of what we have. So anyway, the guy said, this is what I did. The rabbi, the Khatam Sofer, when he heard the story of the student, he said, wow, now I understand why you have suspicions about the validity of our Torah, despite your knowledge in Torah, and despite the fact that you are almost a righteous man. But you did fall into the trap of Chametz. What happens when you fall in the trap of Chametz on Pesach? Well, the first thing it gives you questions. You start with doubts. Little by little it progresses, and if you don't do something about it, like doing tshuva or doing something to be forgiven, you can be finished. You can practically leave the religion. And Pesach, let me conclude, my friends, with this. Pesach has everything to do with our religion. I mean, let's say today you have some Jews who will tell you they don't believe. Oh yeah? Let's see you the night of Pesach if you are willing to stay without Seder. Even the worst of us would go and look for some of his family to sit with them the night of the Seder. At the same time, it's difficult to find a Jew who eats bread during Pesach. And yet, outside of Pesach, after Pesach, so many Jews, unfortunately, they don't keep Shabbat, they don't do many things, right? But Pesach, it is definitely more, it is stronger in the heart of every Jew. Why? Because Pesach is the holiday of faith of the Jewish people. Now let's say you have people who will come to you, prove to me that there is some validity to your Torah and your commandments. All we have to tell him is, what about Pesach? You think that we sit and read all the Haggadah of Pesach and Halach Ma'anya and all the things that we read and the 4 cups of wine and the maror, the bitter herbs, and the eating of the matzah? You think we do this just for fun? It's because our fathers, our forefathers, our forefathers, up to 3,300 years ago, when the Jewish people stood at the mountain of Sinai and accepted the Torah, from that time until today, without any exception, Jews always celebrated Pesach with everything that goes with it. Number one, the remembrance of the sortie of Egypt. That's our foundation, the foundation of the faith of Judaism. I mean, the fact that we have been liberated and redeemed from Egypt. And you have to understand, I'll tell you a little piece of chidush. You know, the redemption from Egypt was only the beginning. It is connected to the final redemption of the Jewish people. That's why some great thinkers of the Jewish people say that the Geulah, that's why we say Ga'al Israel. We don't say Go'el Israel, the Redeemer of Israel. The one, we say Ga'al Israel. Ga'al means the past as well as the future. The one who redeemed us and will redeem us. Because we are still waiting for the final redemption. Of course, thank God, today we already see the beginning of the redemption of the Jewish people, with, of course, the establishment of the Jewish land, of the Jewish, of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, back to in our hands. May God bless the army of Israel. May God bless the Jewish people wherever they are. But the first paragraph that we recite in the Haggadah of Pesach, and remember, one of the reasons we call it Pesach is not only what I said in the beginning, passing over. It means also Pesach, the mouth that talks. What does it mean? Well, the most fundamental mitzvah, precept, commandment of Pesach is to read the Haggadah. You cannot just think about it. You have to read the Haggadah. You have to tell your children and your grandchildren what happened to us long time ago when we were enslaved in Egypt, and then we came out from Egypt with tremendous miracles that God brought upon the world, upon the Egyptians and upon us, and the splitting of the sea, and the 10 plagues, and the death of the firstborn of the Egyptians, and then the receival of the Torah at the mountain of Sinai. It's all related in the book of the Haggadah that we are supposed to recite the night of the Seder before we start eating. All we eat before is a piece of matzah, a piece of maror, and then we sit down to eat like kings. And we have to behave like kings the night of Pesach. Why? Because it gives us the most marvelous feeling that our faith is the faith of faiths. Judaism. That's the religion that will always be everlasting, forever and ever. The nations will recognize it. That's our belief. We do respect all the religions, but We have also the prophecy of our prophets where it says, when all the nations will join us and of course turn to the only God that there is in all the cosmos, in all the world. And that's what. How do we know that for sure? Pesach. We do it today like they have done it last year, and last year like before. This generation, it's exactly like they did in the last generation, and the generation before, and before, and before, and before, exactly from the time as it happened from the time of Moses and the liberation of the redemption of the Jews from Egypt. This is the proof for Judaism. This is the proof for our religion. No question about it. That's why we have to tell the story. And it says, "Avafilu kulanu chachamim." Even though we know the story, and even though we are all smart, and even though we don't need to tell the story, we know it. We are still under the obligation to say it to us, to our wives, to our children, to teach our children. That's why the second paragraph of the Haggadah is Manishtana. What is Manishtana? Those are the 4 questions that the son tells you. And you have to be ready to give him the answers. And the answers begin with the 3rd paragraph of the Haggadah. The Haggadah is Avadim ayinu b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves in Egypt. You have to start from the very beginning. And even before that. That's why at a certain time in the Haggadah we start with Mittechila of the Avodah Zarah you avotenu. We do declare our deficiency, the fact that we also, our forefathers used to worship idols also. We are no better than the nations. We are no better than them. But the slavery in Egypt had transformed us. We were subdued. And because of this submission, we became meritorious to submit ourselves to God and to accept His Torah. Even though the Torah consists of 613 commandments plus 7 other commandments by the sages. What gave us this energy? Only because we were enslaved. The submission is what caused us to become the nation of God. And the nations know that. They know that. But they know also that they could not receive the Torah. Perhaps this is the reason why we are hated. But this is only a matter